When I was in the U.S. recently, I had the opportunity to record 4 sessions with Pastor George Grace on the topic of leadership. So I'm excited about that. I hope you tune in. Actually, I hope you subscribe and like, because you don't want to miss this. Discipleship is leadership training. Let's hear from Pastor Grace himself. Enjoy this.
My name is Pastor George Grace, and I was a senior pastor at First Bible in Rochester in the United States for over 30 years, and I've been in the ministry for about 50 years now. So I've been involved in leadership all that time, and certainly much more than that. My experience in life isn't just limited to being in the ministry. I've served in a big corporation, a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I worked in the research labs of Eastman Kodak Company when I was a child, essentially. I've worked for small concerns, a pizza shop where there was 2 owners to it, so it wasn't a corporation, obviously. I've worked in this food service industry for 5.5 years. After I served as a senior pastor, I did that for the company that I worked for. Was $1.5 billion a year company. So I've been in a lot of different situations, church situations, obviously, in leadership. So when I talk about leadership, I really have a very broad, not to mention I'm 78 years old, I have a very broad experience in the world. So what I want to do, though, is I want to share with you, just for the few minutes that I have, some of the things that I've learned from the Bible about leadership, and primarily the qualifications for leadership. Because there's something in all of us that makes us feel like we want to be the leader, we want to be the head, we want to be the person that dictates what we're going to do, where we're going to go, how we're going to do it. There's something there. Now, there's some people that don't want to have anything to do with that. But I'm going to say people that watch videos like this, the vast majority of you are people that they're looking for leadership. In fact, when you talk about biblical discipleship, it is leadership training. That's what Jesus was doing with his disciples. He knew he was going to leave, and he was going to leave these 11 disciples behind to be the leaders, the founders of the New Testament church. So anyway, I go to the Bible to look for qualifications for leadership. In the New Testament, I went through all of the books of the New Testament, reading it with this thought in mind, looking for what does the Bible say about qualifications of leadership for people in the ministry, for pastors, elders, etc. There are other terms too, like overseers and bishops, etc., that are used for that. But I think that many of us think of pastors as the leader or an evangelist, someone like that. Well, in my study, I found 32 passages in the New Testament, 32 different passages that speak of the qualifications for leadership in Christianity, in a church, among Christian people. And I'm just going to go through just a few moments and list them and maybe make a comment about each one of them. 32 different passages. I'm not going to quote the passages, don't have time to do that. But the first thing that I found on the list and prioritized it was this, that you have to have a good reputation to be a leader. If you have a bad reputation, people don't want to follow somebody who's been in trouble, who makes trouble, who causes trouble. Obviously that person is not qualified to lead. They can't even lead themselves. So when we talk about that, I see passages that talk about being blameless, being of good behavior, being grave, and that's an English word that means to be very serious and whatnot, is part of an individual who has a good reputation. And a good reputation outside of the church too. Not just among the people who are in the church, but you have a good reputation in your community. The second thing I found is that a leader needs to have self-control. He has to be in charge of himself. That goes back to what I said about good reputation. He has to have self-control. So some of the passages or words that I found in the New Testament that spoke to this principle: temperate, That means self-control, not given to wine or not given to extremes, alcohol, drugs, not controlled by something else outside of your spirit, your soul, your mind. Then I found godly values. When we talk about values, we're talking about what's really important. How does a person live his life? How does he deal with other people? Godly values are honesty, somebody that's respectful, someone who follows through with what they say they're going to do or be for someone else. So godly values are people who are not greedy, who are not selfish, people who are not covetous, people who are not envious. So that's approaching that subject from the negative side. Godly values are people who are humble, who are trustworthy, who are honest, etc. Those are qualifications for leadership. In fact, several surveys that I've read over the years about leadership, what is the singularly most important thing in a leader that people are looking for? They're looking for integrity or trustworthiness. That's a biggie. That may be the biggie. Of course, that goes back to being a person of having a good reputation, having control over yourself, but godly values. Some of the passages in the New Testament that I found said, not greedy of money, not greedy of filthy lucre is the word the King James Bible uses. Not covetous, a lover of good men, holy. That means to be pure. Again, that goes back to having a good reputation. So again, we got a person with a good reputation. We got somebody who has self-control or is temperate. We've got somebody who has godly values. Those are important. Fourthly, now if you went out into the world, you probably wouldn't find this as a qualification, although it certainly works everywhere, and that is, fourth is a loving heart, someone who is a lover. Now as a Christian, the two greatest commandments are to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength, and thy neighbor as thyself. Those are the two greatest commandments. So how could you put them aside and say they're not qualifications for leadership in Christianity? Of course they are. Somebody who has a loving heart, who's concerned about the welfare, genuine welfare and well-being of other people. That is so important. But some of the passages I found, a loving heart, someone who is gentle, someone who is given to hospitality. A person who is hospitable is somebody who welcomes strangers into his life and treats them with love and respect, treats them the way they would want to be treated themselves. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing, and again, this might not be on the list of those in a secular world or outside of Christianity, but it certainly helps, and that is a healthy home life. Healthy home life. Now this is what I think about that. If you can't lead your family, how are you going to lead anything? If you can't treat people, 3 or 4 people in your little group of your family, your wife or your husband or your children or whatnot, or your immediate relatives, if you can't treat them properly and show them love and kindness and deference, if you can't, how in the world are you going to do this with a group of people outside of that? People that you don't know well. People that are not your relatives, that don't owe you anything, or maybe they owe you everything. You treat them quite differently than you would someone that you love in your own family. If you do that, that could disqualify you. So that I always look at the home. What's going on in the relationship between the husband and wife? If we're talking about a male, how does he raise or deal with his children, etc.? Those are very important. Now in Christianity, we're talking about, this is my 6th qualification that I found out of 32 different verses in the Bible. A mature faith, someone who has experience in life, someone who has education, not necessarily formal, although that's helpful, obviously, but someone who has been educated, someone who has maybe some Bible education, has taken the Bible seriously in the things that we're talking about right now. But the Bible says leaders should not be novices. That is, they're not new at what they're doing. You just don't appoint the guy that walks in off the street that you don't know and say, hey, would you be our leader? You don't do that. People need to be proven in their leadership. They need to be, going back to other things that I've said, they need to be trustworthy. They need to be experienced. They need to have proven themselves. In fact, 1 Timothy chapter 3 actually says that. It says, let these also first be proved or proven, meaning that they've been tested. You see how they react under different sets of circumstances. Holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. They say what they mean what they say, and they get their thoughts or their values, they extract them from God's holy word. And so they are believable because their lives and their beliefs line up with what they read in Scripture. So a mature faith. The last thing is a teachable mind. I have a friend who was a principal in public education for many years and then in Christian education for many years. Older than me, probably 8 years older than me. I really respect. I was his boss, but he worked for me. But I looked to him for many opinions and pieces of advice and whatnot. And I remember one day I asked him this. I said, Nick, his name was Nick Fabry. I said, Nick, what is the most important thing that you look for in a new teacher for your school? What is it? He didn't even hesitate. He said, I'm looking for someone who is teachable, someone who is willing to learn, who will sit and listen to what I have to say. They don't have to know everything. Not that I know everything, but I know a lot more than they do after 30 or 40 years of being in education. They may not know everything, but I can teach them about everything that they're ever going to need to know in this profession. So I'm looking for people who will listen and will take my advice and follow up on it. Those are people that ultimately become leaders. What they do is they affiliate themselves with good people. They find people who are worth listening to, have got experience, got education, are proven, and they follow them and they look carefully to them to see what they do, why they do it, how they do it, and all that, and they learn from that. They're teachable people. So just to sum it all up very, very quickly, and I'm done, I can go backwards. A teachable mind, someone who has a mature faith, someone who is proven, somebody who has a healthy home life. They can handle small groups, which leads me to believe that they might be able to handle something larger. They have true love for God and they have love for people. They demonstrate godly values. They're humble, honest, not prideful, not envious. They respect people. They have self-control, control over themselves and their appetites. And then lastly, they have a good reputation. Not only a good reputation among the people that they are immediately leading, but they have a good reputation outside of that group too. They haven't blown it or made a mess out of their lives where they've become just incredible when it comes to offering any truth. So this is a lesson. These are biblical qualifications for leaders in church. Something you ought to try. My name's Pastor George Grace. I am one of the pastors at First Bible Baptist Church in Rochester, New York. And our church is sponsoring these presentations here. And we're thankful to you for watching. But if you're ever in the area, we're in Hilton, Greece, New York, 14468. If you're ever in that area, we invite you to come to church. We meet on Sunday mornings at 8:35, 10:35. We have a midweek service. We have all kinds of opportunities. Bible Institute, Christian school, sports park, We have many things, many places that people can get involved. Want to invite you to come. If you're in the area, please stop by.